About that, we're joined by Peter Tatchell, the veteran LGBT rights campaigner. Thank you very much indeed for being with us.
To join you.
Now, in your many years of campaigning, and you have campaigned all over the world, have you ever come across something like this where police officers, law enforcement officials are basically trying to hunt down people because of their sexuality?
Well, this has been happening in Egypt for many, many years, and probably hundreds of gay and bisexual men have been caught using this system of entrapment where Egyptian police pose as gay, go online, lure men to agree to rendezvous, and then arrest them. It's also very interesting that sometimes men on these dating apps are just simply looking for friendship and companionship. They're not looking for sex. But the Egyptian police pressure them into saying that they want sex, and then use that as evidence to arrest them. They've also evidence that the police have actually doctored texts and photographs to make them compromising in order to justify prosecution and to secure jail time. Now, this tactic has been used by other countries as well. It is a favored tactic of many homophobic tyrannies as a way of getting at the LGBT plus community, terrorizing them, and of course, jailing as many as possible.
Now, it's not actually illegal to be gay in Egypt, as I said in the introduction, unlike, of course, many countries in the Middle East. There is, however, a law against so-called debauchery, and that is what they're using to entrap people, isn't it?
That's correct. They use this generic catch-all clause of debauchery as a way of prosecuting gay and bisexual men, and sometimes lesbian and bi women as well, but much less so. I mean, you go back to the raid on the Queen boat many years ago, where I think 52 gay Egyptians were arrested in one foul swoop. They were all charged with debauchery, and many of them end up serving many years in prison. So it is nothing new, but it is based on an interpretation of law rather than an actual law that explicitly forbids homosexuality.
Now, one British MP did call on Egypt to refrain from this practice, to do more to protect LGBT people. Would you like Western countries to do more?
Well, of course, Britain is complicit with the Egyptian police because we train them. We train Egyptian police officers in this country. We give them training. So we are complicit with a police service that persecutes and oppresses.
But the British police, I should say, the British police are not training the Egyptian police to track down gay people.
No, but they are giving them training in all kinds of sophisticated techniques, including online tech, which can then be used or misused and abused to track LGBT plus people. And also, of course, Britain provides aid and other trade with Egypt. And you've got to ask yourself, if we really stood for an ethical foreign policy, why would we have any kind of deals with what is a dictatorship? I mean, there is no freedom of expression or right to protest in Egypt. It is basically a police state. And it's not just LGBT plus people who are victimized. It's also women. It's political oppositionists and Democrat reformers. It's also those who represent oppressed minorities, ethnic minorities and tribal peoples within Egypt. So this is a much bigger, wider issue. And I think that Britain really needs to give a lead by stop colluding with this regime, full stop, and using our influence at the United Nations to pressure Egypt to change.
Do you think that, sadly, these police practices and these laws are just a reflection of attitudes in the Middle East, which does have traditional patriarchal societies? Do you see any sign of attitudes changing here?
Well, of course, up until about 20 years ago, Egypt has a relatively liberal attitude, a hands-off attitude towards the LGBT plus community. There was no systemic organized persecution. There were sometimes occasional arrests and prosecutions, but it was quite rare. It's only in recent years, relatively recent years or decades, that this persecution has intensified to this extreme level. You know, you go to Egypt, and if you're a man and if you're good looking, you will get propositioned by Egyptian men all the time. But some of these Egyptian men who do the propositioning are undercover police officers. So I had some friends who went to Egypt on a holiday. They were gay. They were open to having a relationship with a local person, but they were too terrified because they'd heard how Westerners had been lured by police into admitting their sexuality and engaging in same-sex acts and then ending up in prison. But for foreigners, the more likely punishment is arrest, small jail time, and then deportation. For Egyptians, it's often 3 to 5 years behind bars. And as you probably know, a person who displayed a rainbow flag at a pop concert some time, I think it was last year or the year before, they ended up in prison for simply displaying a rainbow flag.
I mean, I know that you were in Qatar also protesting about this issue. Do you see any comparisons with Egypt and Qatar?
Well, of course, the Qatar police use the same techniques. They also lure gay men on gay dating sites to rendezvous and then arrest them. So this is pretty scary. And I've spoken to Qataris who said that they would love to go on a gay dating site, even just to meet other gay people and just be friends. But they're too terrified because the Qatari police will then lure them into making some kind of incriminating statement and use that to either prosecute and jail them, or more likely to force them to undergo so-called conversion therapy. Qatar has secret gay conversion centers where one victim told me he was psychologically, emotionally, and religiously brainwashed into stop being gay.
Peter,
he was so traumatized he committed suicide.
That's a terrible story. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. We very much appreciate your insight and your expertise there. Peter Tatchell there.